Artificial wombs could change the future of pregnancy and lead to the end of abortions.
Imagine babies grown in labs. It sounds like a sci-fi cliché. But a groundbreaking team of experts across Europe are hoping to build the world's first clinically approved artificial womb.
Artificial wombs may be the future of pregnancy and could end abortions forever. I was shocked to discover that these wombs are rapidly on the way as researchers are rushing to develop the first clinically approved artificial wombs. And these would actually allow the transfer of a fetus into an artificial womb that would preserve its life. Watch it into video to fully understand the implications that these artificial wombs could have and the reality that they may come much sooner than we've realized and how this could actually affect abortion.
In order to save the lives of babies born prematurely, with nearly 1 million dying every year, the race is on.
Time is really of the essence because we quickly have to provide the infant with oxygen.
James was born at exactly 24 weeks. He was really very, very tiny. When he got my pinky fingernail, it was with his whole hand.
In 2012, Sonna's son James was born prematurely. And like many premature babies, he was put in an incubator.
The doctors told us his chance of surviving was 50%. An incubator is a very hostile environment.
Tragically, James died 2 months later. While incubators save many lives, half of those born at 24 weeks do not survive in incubators. This is partly because their lungs aren't yet sufficiently formed to breathe air.
An environment more similar to the womb is, I think, the best solution. We wish to help the parents and children who came after us.
And that's exactly what Sonna is now trying to do. Since 2020, Sonna has been an advisory board member to an elite team of scientists and engineers. They're taking on an extraordinary challenge, constructing an artificial womb.
What we really need is a liquid-filled environment that protects the baby from air. That would be a wish come true.
Welcome, and I think we can start the program according to the agenda, which is now on the...
Professor Frans van der Vosse leads the team hoping to make that wish a reality.
The part of our work package is to find alternatives for the birth procedure.
Coordinated by the Eindhoven University of Technology in the Netherlands, the approach is innovative. It's as much mathematical as medical.
My background is not in medical sciences. My background is in physics.
How does our oxygenator work?
The 29-strong team includes global experts in computational modeling and industrial design, as well as pregnancy and childbirth.
The main challenge here is that the liquid-filled chambers layer is not conductive.
In this unique group, each collaborator has different skills. They are united by the goal of designing and building a womb that replicates the conditions inside a real one. Good modeling is the key to success here.
We predict the weather by making a model of the stratosphere by using mathematical models. We want to predict what will happen, in this case for the cardiovascular system of the baby inside the womb of the mother.
Other projects in this field are testing by placing baby animals, such as lambs, in bags of liquid. But this EU-funded team is using a very different beast: silicone rubber.
We can hopefully postpone animal experiments for a while by making mannequins that help us to mimic and simulate, like a flight simulator, what is happening in the system.
Juliette von Haren is in charge of designing the mannequins.
You see basically the range of motions that we can achieve using these flexures and the motors that we have embedded in our mannequin.
What I find very interesting about this project is that it is at the intersection of art design and biology, engineering.
One of the big challenges of this project is finding a way to safely transfer the fetus from the mother to the artificial womb. But the team believe they have found an answer: a liquid tunnel.
So the infant moves from liquid into liquid.
Once the baby is inside the liquid tunnel, the umbilical cord can be cut. Then, after the baby reaches the artificial womb, things get even more challenging. The umbilical cord has to be quickly reattached, this time to an artificial placenta. If this takes more than a few minutes, lack of oxygen will damage the baby's brain. If all goes smoothly, the baby will spend the next 4 weeks receiving all its required oxygen and nutrients through the artificial placenta and womb. The hope is that more premature babies will survive in these liquid-filled polymer bags. Compared with being in an incubator, it should be easier for their lungs to grow enough to be able to breathe air. Weeks later, when the baby is around 28 weeks, they can be safely placed in an incubator before being finally released to their parents' care. But to build a fully functioning artificial womb, the team has to overcome other potentially fatal risks, not least blood clotting.
The main problems we have now is blood tends to coagulate if it comes in contact with materials that are not owned by the body itself.
With so many obstacles to overcome, it could be at least a decade before this technology is rolled out to make a difference in the world. What's more, it won't be cheap initially. And what about dystopian fears of opening the door to growing babies entirely outside the human womb? The team are adamant that their technology cannot be used in this way.
The idea that you could use maybe the system from the start to the end. The technology is not suitable for earlier situations.
We want to save children, and that's the goal of the project.
So, just to be very clear, the way that this thing, I think they're talking total BS. They're basically saying that, well, we don't want our technology to be used this way, so it won't be used this way. Guys, this video was actually inspired by a comment I received from someone who basically said, hey, Angry, do you think China's going to have an artificial womb soon? And, you know, this is, guys, if they develop this technology, there's one thing that the Chinese are excellent at, and that's copying us. They will copy this thing very, very quickly, reverse engineer it, and use it for whatever purposes they decide to, because their ethical standards are very, very different. Now, in the case of this artificial womb, however, it is literally being designed in such a way that they would be able to move the child, move the fetus over to the artificial womb, quickly attach it attach its umbilical cord to an artificial placenta, and allow it to continue living and developing separately. So at this point, you know, if there is an alternative and viable method of keeping the baby alive, right? Legally speaking, they could order, right? You know, women could be basically, you know, women could say that they want to, you know, end their pregnancy, and they have a legal right to do that, but they may not necessarily have a legal right to end the life of a child. Now, if we actually look at this thing that I pulled up from Copilot, so basically ChatGPT, the question of whether women have the legal right to terminate the life of a fetus that could survive outside the womb, particularly the use of an artificial womb, is complex and largely uncharted territory in legal framework. Here are some key considerations. Viability and legal rights. In many jurisdictions, the legal right to terminate a pregnancy is closely tied to the concept of fetal viability, which is typically defined as the ability of the fetus to survive outside the womb with or without medical assistance. If artificial wombs become a viable option, this could redefine the point of viability and potentially impact abortion laws. Next is bodily autonomy. The right to bodily autonomy is a fundamental principle in abortion rights. Even if a fetus could be transferred to an artificial womb, the decision to undergo such a procedure would still involve significant ethical and legal considerations regarding the pregnant person's rights. Ethical and legal debates. The introduction of artificial wombs could lead to new ethical and legal debates. Some scholars argue that if a fetus can be transferred to an artificial womb, it might shift the focus from the rights to terminate a pregnancy to the rights of the fetus. However, this would require new legislation and legal precedents to address the complexities involved. Current legal landscape. As of now, there are no specific laws mandating the use of artificial wombs in place of pregnancy terminations. The legal landscape is primarily focused on the rights of the pregnant person and the viability of the fetus. Now, I want you guys to take into consideration one thing, and that is the Supreme Court. If you look at how the Supreme Court has been voting recently, they are heavily positioned more on a conservative. They are very much more on a conservative position. They recently ended Roe versus Wade, and if you look at the decisions that they're making, if we continue to have, a majority of conservatives in the Supreme Court at any time in the future where an artificial womb would become present and viable and readily available, because guys, this could basically be along the lines of an incubator. While the technology may not be extremely cheap initially, that is something that could change very quickly. And like I said, China could be the very big factor in this. Because if you look at what they're doing with electronic vehicles, they've basically taken EVs and they're manufacturing them for pennies right now. And if China is allowed to sell their EVs in the United States, it would completely destroy the electric car market. They can make an EV for like $10,000 right now, 10, 20,000. They're selling these EVs for pennies on the dollar. Okay, and that's the reason why they're putting massive tariffs on them, 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs. Let's make this clear. If they can do this with EVs in such a short period of time, like literally, guys, we're talking about 5 years. Within a few years, China has developed a massive EV market, taken Elon Musk's technology that it took him 10, 15 years to develop, 20 years to develop. They have done all of that within like 5 years and created cars that are superior to a lot of the cars that are being manufactured by Tesla right now, which is the top EV manufacturer in the United States. Guy, if they can do this in literally like 5 years, where they can now be at the top, and they're making these cars like they're printing paper, then realize they can take they can basically take this technology and they can make it extremely cheap, readily available, at any given moment. I'll put it this way: it may cost less, or right in the same ballpark, to have one of these devices, artificial wombs, as it would cost for an incubator, or even less. And here's the thing: these devices would likely be, once they're approved, and and simply manufactured in China. If they come to, people would begin using them in the U.S. It brings up the legal viability of this, and knowing how the Supreme Court is, in the event that it's proven that, hey, well, we can clearly see that, babies at this period of stage are being taken and put over when the mother wants to save the child's life, but her life is at risk. If that's the case, and it's being done all around the country, okay, and these devices are readily available, easily accessible, then the Supreme Court could say, in the case, and that's what I think would end up happening, in the case where this technology is readily available and the state makes it readily available, then the right of the child to live must also be taken into consideration. So as long as it will not harm the mother or create any problem, as long as it will not bring harm to the mother, right, compared to the actual act of termination, then the right of the child would still be preserved, and they would basically mandate that the child would have to be placed in an artificial womb. At that point, also, if the mother decides to go down that path, she would probably also end up losing the rights to the child. So, for example, if she says that she goes to a clinic and she says that she wants to terminate, right, versus, she doesn't want to, she wants to terminate, but she, on the grounds that she no longer wants the child, then she would lose the rights. Although it could also present another option where a woman could say, well, she wants to end the pregnancy, but she does not want to surrender her parental rights. She just does not want to carry the baby. That's another very big thing to consider, where a lot of women may end up getting pregnant, and they'll basically say, "Oh my gosh, I got pregnant," and they may carry the baby for a certain number of months, and then they may be able to transfer the baby after a couple of months and say, "Well, you know what? I don't want to carry it anymore. I'm not feeling well, and I would rather have the baby transferred over to an artificial womb." That's a big deal, guys, and that's another factor where pregnancies can become much shorter. So, for example, instead of a woman having a 9-month pregnancy, these pregnancies could actually end up going down to 3 to 4 months, or even or 6 months, and the baby would be transferred over to the artificial womb, and then the gestation process would continue there. So we could actually be heading towards a future where many women will no longer actually be carrying babies to full term. They'll get pregnant, and then within a few months of their pregnancy, many times by the time they even discover that they're pregnant, they'll just simply go and do a transplant, and the fetus will be transferred from inside of their bodies over to the artificial womb, and the gestation, the pregnancy process will take place over there and finish over there in the artificial womb. So it's kind of a hybrid mix right there. But this is going to open up so many doors. And I think that there's also going to be a lot of women who say that they don't want this to happen. For example, they're going to say, I've seen an argument, for example, where women have said that, it doesn't matter if an artificial womb is available. Those cells still belong to them. So they have a legal right to not have that, have that child enter into the world because they own those cells. I don't think it works like that. And we'll have to really figure out how it actually works. But I think if the Democrats have control of the Senate, of the Supreme Court, then that argument might work, or something along the lines. They'll find some BS. But if we continue to have a supermajority in the Senate of conservatives, I think that it's very possible and plausible that it would be mandated that an artificial womb, when available, should be used to preserve the life of the child. And I think that's the direction that we're going to be going in potentially. It's going to create a lot of stirring. They've said that, it may take 10 years before this thing is available on the market. However, the way the world works is things can happen much, much faster. And keep in mind, that's 10 years before this is necessarily commonplace, not 10 years before this thing, is actually out. In other words, it could be available and being used in hospitals around the world on a case of emergency basis. So, for example, if they need these things to save the lives of children, it could be presented as an experimental device, and it could be approved for emergency use in cases when there are no other options available, and the parent consents to this. And as a result of that, we could end up seeing these things. This is my suspicion, in as little as 5 years being used around the country. It would not become commonplace until around 10 to even 15 years from now. But that guys, things can happen in a blink of an eye. And like I said, if these things are proved viable after 5 years of use, and China begins manufacturing them rapidly, it could lead to much faster approval of these devices within a shorter time frame. So we could actually see these things actually approved and becoming fully available across the United States and the world within more like 5 to 6 years or 5 to 7 years. So by the early 2030s or mid 2030s, these could be the artificial womb could actually be available. It could be available across the United States. And keep in mind, 45% of all women, almost half of all women, will be childless and single come 2030. And then when you factor in single mothers, we're looking at around 70 to 90%. Most men are walking away from relationships, dating, and either choosing to be men with all men walking away, which are men with alternatives and looking for women overseas or so forth, or using surrogates, or they're basically choosing to go their own way, not have children or engage in relationships and avoid society. And basically, they're basically avoiding relationship society and choosing to just live separate lives entirely. This could become a very viable option for a lot of these men. Someone asked, well, do you think that we could have artificial wombs that are embedded in the bodies of robots? So for example, robo babes, that are powered by artificial intelligence. I think that it's a possibility that could happen in the next 100 to 200 years. I think that the biggest problem is going to be the ethics of something like that happening. I don't think that we're going to see robots walking around with artificial wombs, embedded inside of them, because I think that also the process is that you're going to need these things to be monitored. You're going to need the babies to be monitored while in the womb by medical professionals and machines and so forth. So I don't see this process. I don't see that happening over the course of 100 years, probably even over the course of 1,000 years. I think it's way too dangerous to say that, say that. Now, on the other hand, if we do reach a period where we have things like Cylons, if you watch Battlestar Galactica, where you had essentially human hybrids, human machine hybrids, where these things were basically humans, but they were still somewhat cybernetic and they could actually have babies of their own, then, or at least some of them could, or one of them could, to my recollection. Well, then it's a little bit different, and that brings us into a whole other universe, whole other realm of like consideration. But yeah, these artificial rooms could be not only the future of pregnancy, but they could also end abortions forever. By the way, guys, if you're enjoying the content, subscribe to our newsletter for my personal thoughts, insights, and a free copy of my new guide, The Digital Nomad Blueprint, and click the link in the description to get your free copy. Also, subscribe to the Angry Guy Clip channel, where we post shorter videos and video responses, and also the Angry Guy Live channel, where we live stream. Both channels are linked in the description. I mean, guys, what do you think regarding all of this? Artificial wombs, they may be the future of pregnancy and also the end of abortions. Let me know your thoughts. We'll talk about it in the comments. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.